pistachios, and we can put chestnuts on the intake areas. These are all semi-arid plants and so on. And we've got arid land oaks, and we've got pod-bearing trees. These are all partly forage. When you actually come to planting, there are a few things you can do. First of all, we'll presume you've made some swales, and what you do with swales is wait for rain. Solid rain. And then you plant in loose soils, because these are newly made swales. And you plant in a foot of loose soils here, and you get a very good result. That's not loose. And that's for most of the valuable plants that you'll be putting, valuable trees you'll be putting in. You need to wait for rains. So you have some soil reserve of moisture. Otherwise, you find yourself having to go around with a tank and a truck and water your small trees. Now, there's a set of trees which are ultra hardy, such as the prosopis, mesquite, acacia and inga, all of which will come out of grasslands with minimal moisture. They just need a good rain, and you put them, and you can neglect them to some extent. And they're a valuable set of trees. They're all have forage, and they all have humus. They all drop leaf. And this leaf's intended to wash into your swales and build up a thick humus cover here. Okay. When you're out in true deserts and you have to plant trees, you can go to a lot of preparation for very valuable trees, and it's worth it. You can plant the trees in a little basin, which itself is a catchment. There's your little tree. You can mulch the basin. You can put stones or netting on the mulch if you have problems with browsing animals. And you can shade your tree with towards the sun with a couple of branches from some other trees. So you have some shade. The real essential thing for establishment on the broad scale is that you lower browsing predators, such as cottontails and hares, by hunting them down or getting them down fairly thin. When a tree's mulched, and it's planted in a little basin which itself it collects water, and it's a very good idea to put some moist ground covers in here. Depending on your climate, whether these are sort of things like comfrey, roots of comfrey here, or whether it's sweet potato. Comfrey goes most anywhere. Sweet potato goes wherever the climate's hot, like it is here in the summer. Anything moist, geraniums, fine. Something to keep the root area cool around your tree while it's growing. And it'll form a little pool of green mulch. Then as far as watering goes, you should water subsurface if possible. That's the ultra high value trees like some is citrus. There are two ways. The most efficient way to water, which we use mainly in India, is to sink an unglazed pot in there with a little loose lid on it and just pour water in the pot periodically. It weeps out. That is the most efficient watering system yet devised. It won't appeal to you because you have to go around and pour water in pots along the trees. The other way we use in Australia is we have a little box which clips together, which is a mesh box. We fill that with 3/4 inch gravel, and we put an 1/8 inch hole in a pipe that runs through it, and we have a box at each tree, and we time the amount of time it takes to water an area 1 yard in diameter. You can do that fairly easily. And then you should just see the first signs of moisture below the mulch, and it takes about 12 minutes turning on your pipe. And when the first sign of moisture appears up here, you know you've got a cubic yard of water at the root of your tree. And then you don't water again until the tree shows some stress. So you put your water out underground. The gravel in this little box prevents clogging. The box clips together. It's a little plastic cage. And across your pipeline. And then you just turn on your tap for 12 minutes, and you have a metre of water at and below the roots of your tree. That's a very successful method. Any questions after this? Yes?
So you're watering them all at once? The water's going to all the boxes?
Yes.
The other thing is,
It'll go 100 feet.
is there essential...
Every time, you can have to start another tap 100 feet on it and have another pipe that runs 100 feet, and that'll serve, so many boxes, yes. Drip, you can run drip lines along above ground or even just below the mulch and put various lengths of small pipe that'll drip here, but it takes a long time for you to get much penetration. And if you haven't mulched, you also get evaporation, so you'll see your white salts gathering on the surface here, eventually carbonates, and you'll push your pH up quite a lot. Whereas if you don't let that occur, that evaporation of a slow watering system, then you get very little salt build up by putting all your water underground, yes.
Is the comfrey a safe food for most farm animals?
Yes, it's been used as food for a good century for all sorts of livestock. Horses and racehorses have been bred on it for many years, and pigs and chickens.
Do you have to cut them out? Can they get too much?
I think I'd leave that up to the animals, give them choices. Many animals won't eat comfrey till it's wilted a little, so if you're going to cut and feed, you just cut the day before and feed yesterday's comfrey. It's possibly quite safe for you, but it's not certainly safe for you, and it's not a particularly delicious food. I mean, anybody who likes to eat comfrey is a little bit off the side here. As it contains allantoin, it's very good cell proliferant, so it's always been used to mend things, cuts and so on. It's always been used as an ointment. Yeah.
How is, in a soil, in a earth-moving sense, is the soil just like a terrace?
No, it's not a bit like a terrace. Terrace is like this. It continuously occupies the land, gets exactly the same amount of rain as any other patch of the land, 4 inches or whatever, whereas the swale obviously gathers rain and infiltrates it and prevents overflow. No, not necessarily. If you've got a heavy rain, it'll overflow, nothing to prevent it. And terracing doesn't improve the amount of moisture you're gathering. Terrace has nothing to do with water harvesting.
Well, in an earth-moving sense, is it built the same way?
No.
Spoil being put up here and...
Yeah, well, it's a different thing. We get on to earthworks. Right. So there's a perfectly planted tree, and it will succeed. It will succeed, yeah.
Do you recommend planting new trees in chicken wire baskets?
It's a tree in a basket,
Yeah.
but the basket above ground, so you have a fence around here, you mean?
No, the chicken wire baskets.
Under here?
Yeah.
No, because you do, inevitably you do root pruning. And what you're looking for is to encourage deep rooting. Let me get rid of another fairy tale, which I've heard quite a lot in the United States, is that if you put the trees out and don't water them enough, it forces the roots down, right? It doesn't. It doesn't. The best penetration of roots are if you water below root level. Is that clear? You know, lots of people go around and say, oh, these trees are very hardy, I haven't watered them very much. but they'll have a deep root penetration. Not so. The root penetration is a lot more shallow than if you'd watered them. And the tree can't get down unless it's got the water to drive the roots down. So you need to water trees pretty well for 2 years. After 2 years, you start periods of benign neglect, and with our fairly hardy fruit trees, you know, the mulberries and and figs and things, you can probably cease watering after 2 years. It's very important to invest time and effort in the first 2 years of the life of any tree, because the payback is relatively huge. And then you can give them increasing amounts of benign neglect. Right? Anybody got any argument with that? Are you all right there? We get a very low tree death. I think in 3,000 or 4,000 trees we might lose 5 or 6. And so we have very high success rates laying out trees in swales and in reeds. So we want to set up the home garden. We use, you can't have too much shade. So you can, if you can afford to put up a high shade over your garden, and if you're in true desert, you can put vertical barrier of plastic below ground on the edges. You use that bed type that we said before, and that can be expanded. It can actually look like that. Water from the top. So lay your drip lines along in here, mulch across, and grow up here. And 2 things you must add probably. You should add a sulphate of zinc or iron or both. A very tiny amount per square yard. Bring your pH down in your garden bed. You should add mulch. One of the common sources of mulch in deserts is fossilised animal droppings, fossilised cow droppings. Just put them through a chipper and they turn into sort of powder. Bark is excellent. Bark is high in mineral. Plenty of bark and old dry cow dung in drylands. So your mulch should be fairly rich in mineral. And anything else you can chip up and just lay that along your beds. And the other thing, if this is sand, if it's sand or sandy, and it often is, you add some clay, the very fine clays, the illites. The illites are those things that gather out in the clay pans in the centres of the deserts. They're extraordinarily fine clays. They turn the water milky. The most common one you know about, we've mentioned, you try to seal your dams with, is bentonite. That's an illite. So you need a good handful of those clays every square yard. And that greatly helps hold water until your humus gets going, in which case your humates and your clays together will hold water in the beds. So you've provided some sulphur as sulphates, some zinc, some iron, some mulch and some clay. You might not have to put clay down. The beds may have sufficient clay to hold water. And you'll have a success from first time you grow. And as to plants you grow in the gardens in the deserts, it's really a matter of your choice. There's almost no plants normally grown that won't grow well in desert. All vegetables will grow well. Carrots, spinaches, cabbage tribe, they all need some shade. You might put a side shade here on the west side and let more light in early on the east side. But you must shade a little over the top. 50% shade would be good. You can arrange that with palm fronds or brush or shade cloth. And that's a successful desert garden. We've grown Very successful market garden on eroded sand dunes under this method. Eroded sand dunes are very daunting. Our soil analysis showed we had no nutrients, 96% silicates. Just a little coating of iron on some of the grains. Yeah. So, you know, that's a successful garden. Broadly speaking, in deserts, you couldn't have too much trellis. And your vine crops do extraordinarily well, and they are very good adjuncts to your house. Imagine a trellis set out here, out where these boards are, out there with a dense vine along it, you know, it would greatly alter the late afternoon climate within this house. And then you can bring it over to this. So we're looking out under a trellised area here. Grapes go well in all deserts, passion fruit, and drylands, oyster nut, very rampageous vine of the African semi-deserts, chocos. Chocos are called chayotes. So we'll list a few vines that are good in deserts. Chayote, which some of you certainly do know. Grape is excellent in all drylands. Passion fruits. There are cold area passion fruits and tropical passion fruits and mid-climate passion fruits. Kiwis, okay, if you've got enough chill factor. Need some chill. And oyster nut. And on and on and on. All I can say is you will never have enough trellis to grow all the sorts of vine crops that are possible to you. Who said something? Its name is Telferia, I think. Telferia. It's cucurbit, perennial cucurbit. Has a huge gourd, big strong ribs, and the ribs are packed with nuts. Yeah, no, you don't know it, that's right. No, it's true. Africa generally has not been used as a genetic base for, I keep mentioning plants, you know, that are present in Africa, like the marama bean and the marotsi melon, and now I bring in the oyster nut, because generally most people go looking for plants anywhere but Africa. The dark continent. Yeah. A whole range of cucurbits. The thing to remember about vines is that they go up here very rapidly, and they do all their fruiting, most of their fruiting, on the horizontal surface. So you know, if you want to do something about this window, and that's the window, and you start a vine up there, go down there and give it very little vertical. So it goes up there and starts fruiting all the way up here. Trellises are most frequently made mostly vertical, very little horizontal. It's a mistake. Cuts down your fruiting. Apropos things like pruning, if you don't have to prune, don't prune. The best grape doesn't need pruning. It'll run about 700, 800 feet either way. Unpruned, it bears far more grapes than it bears pruned. And every year you dig a grave at the roots of the grape, bring a horse along, shoot the horse, drop it in the grave and cover it up, and they'll give you about 7 tons of grapes a year. Rhinoceros, 20 dogs, or 54 cats. Just cover it up, and next year when you dig the grave, there's nothing left. That's the process they used at Kew Gardens to grow 700 feet of grapes, or 7 tons of grapes on one vine. So you'll be pleased to know that the less work you do to grapes, the more grapes you're going to get, and more horses you can shoot. You can eat a little bit of the horse, but you should put the rest in there. Eat grapes. Grapes are better for you than horses for food.
On these raised beds that you got under the trellis,
Mhm.
is there an optimum shape or size for those? I mean,
You don't make this wider, then you can easily reach right across from both sides. So you're always walking here. You should avoid compaction of the beds. So I'd say 4.5 feet would be maximum size. You can bring it narrower if you wish. The other thing about that is if this only needs one centre drip line, something that weeps a bit, there's your mulch. And this will go roughly, it won't go 2 feet quite, it'll go 18 inches. So if the bed were 3'6" wide, the drip line will serve all the base of the bed. We can push it to 4 feet, but then we do something different, which is, you know, you drill a little hole in it and wrap stockings around the hole and tie them either end, and then we'll push it 4 feet. Homemade stuff.
Bill, is there an advantage to having beds running north-south or east-west?
Yes, there is. And in fact, you get a very different effect from them. And generally speaking here, I'd like to run them north-south. You don't always have that opportunity. You may have to run them east-west.
Because you'd be warming the sides?
Yeah. And you get different growths on each side of a slope like that, even though it's a little mound, you know, like that. And your west side is very hot and exposed and dry compared to your east side.
Are those beds like rows or are they squares?
They're rows. Yeah, I've just given you a cross section. They go as long as you have shade cloth to cover. We make them about 100 feet, so we don't have a lot of trouble with water systems. So each one has an individual pipe along it for 100 feet and tends to get a very even spread of water over 100 feet, 4 feet wide, in about 12 minutes. Just turn the taps on, have a ciggy, turn the tap off. That's it. And that's why I smoke.
Just timing stuff.
No.
Yeah, you should only trust people who smoke. People who smoke have, that's why it's so jolly back in the smoking section of airplanes. People are laughing and talking to each other. People who don't smoke are not trustworthy. They have hidden faults. We've all got faults, but if you can't see a conspicuous one, you know there's one there somewhere. Yeah, okay. So here we are, running around doing lines and putting our trees in properly. Now with hardy trees, and if say we're putting an awful lot of trees out, it pays you to run a couple of rip lines on contour, drop a couple of tines for a tractor or an oxen, and they drop one tine from 2 oxen, and drive, you know, just about on contour and rip the soil, because if you're putting out thousands of trees, you need that help. Thousands of holes are not. You'll put 1,000 trees a day in with a rip line, and you'll put about 40 a day in if you're digging big holes for pots, right? So valuable trees, you don't put many a day in, 50, 60. But forestry, hardy trees like Inga or acacia, from little seedlings, you'll put 1,000 in a day, sometimes in the morning if you're very good, with a little trowel along the rip line, boom, boom, boom. That's just practical tips for you. Of course, if you run a swale and you're out in the open, extensive, you've got miles of soft, unconsolidated bank here, so you can run along that very quickly with trees and shrubs. It's no difficulty in planting at all there. Any other questions at all? No? Yeah.
What about seeding the banks so that they don't wash away? Like say if you're in a place with a heavy rain like here, and that's all.
They don't wash away. What they actually do is weep. Water infiltrates rapidly. Say most of it's gone in 2 hours. So if say you had 4 or 6 inches cover on the base of the swale, 2 hours later it's empty again. And that's stored in the soil under the swale. And then as the rain continues, it's unlikely to build up above 6 or 8 inches. Remember, we suggested that for a large swale you leave 3 feet from the base to the top of the bank. Before it gets to the top of the bank, it starts to weep slowly through the bank, and you'll see water trickling away most of the distance along the swale underneath the bank. It'll come under the bank.
So you don't have a problem with if you happen to get some really serious rain, that they doesn't fill up faster than it can drain?
No, your problem doesn't occur in the swale at all. The problem occurs above the swale. As we don't have charge of a total landscape, and we can't always start at the head of a catchment or on, the 2 metres below the brow of a knoll that we suggested your first swale goes. As an example, in Saroe, when I was there in Africa, the town of Saroe is here, and we had a little farm way down here. And our first swale was there, and the slope was here, and all the rainwater from the town, the roofs, the roads, all the water from above the slope to the change of slope, all the water from here hit our first swale, and that may bust your swale out. Even a single cattle track here will bust the swale opposite the track. So you have to put a heavy-duty top swale in if you're expecting runoff from hundreds of times the swale width. That's where your trouble may occur. If you seal it with a leguminous paste or put plastic on a swale base, you don't have a swale. You have I don't know what you have. You have a pool of water sitting on top of the ground. Our idea of the swale is to get our water under the ground as fast as we can. By all means, rip the bottom of the swale. By all means, throw calcium sulfate, what's the name of the stuff? Gypsum along the swale so your soils free up and let your rain through quickly. The whole idea of the swale is to bury the water, not to seal the swale.
So you're saying planting ground cover would seal the soil?
Would what?
Planting a ground cover?
I didn't say anything of the sort. I said if you seal the base of the swale with tar or plastic. I thought you said why don't we put tar on, didn't you?
No, I was asking about seeding it with
Oh. I know. The day you make the swale, you should before you make the swale, you should have a couple of bags of seed ready. These sort of seeds: woolly vetches, lupins, sunflowers, buckwheats, depending on season. All these things should be mixed up. Sorghum, Japanese millet, finger millet, Elyzine, teff, whatever you can get that has a good record in drylands, mix it all up and go on the swale and throw handfuls of it along this unconsolidated soil. And the whole thing comes up, very nicely actually. I buy great bags of parrot seed, mixed parrot seed. Some bad. It's got millets, it's got sunflower, it's got sorghums, it's got very little clovers. You can put some very little vetch. Vetches are very good, the vetches, and they're not long-lasting. Most of these things won't be there after a year. So in between those things, you're going along a swale seeding. Just throw it. It's best to walk the crown of the swale. It's a bit up and down. And just sprinkle both sides, but not too thickly, because the swale is always the soil's moving on top a bit, so all the seeds get buried. If you do it when you first do it, it's rough, and there's all sorts of crevices for seed. And then go along at a metre and put a cutting of something green in, like that'll be perennial, sweet potatoes, mint, stick little sticks in between those of sages and yucca, what do you call it, manioc, cassava, complicate the thing as much and get all that in the first few days. And then put your trees in here. And if these have success, they come creeping down around your trees and blot your grass out. So your trees are not in grass. But if you put your trees in comfrey, then that comes up. Comfrey is another thing you can put along here. Comfrey. Just give it the works, you know. That's where your kids come in. No, you throw it from the ridge all over the swale, both sides. Seed. Don't do it too thickly. You get a good strike rate. And then you put your perennials on the ridge, yeah, and let them come down often. So what might you set out is that, you know, if we're in the tropics, we set out ginger and turmeric and cassava and sweet potato. That's enough. And that just takes over the whole thing and keeps it forever. And then the sweet potato tends to run down there, right around our tree, which suits us fine. And it tends to run across your swale base and eventually get to the other side and start up here. So you have big sheets of sweet potato. The other very great advantage of this is most of these things we're planting are quite fireproof. So you're actually, between the swale and the plantings on the swale, you're setting up a fireproof strip across your landscape, and you're fireproofing your trees too. Those trees and these trees. So you can't get a strong ground fire going uphill. It's another large advantage of putting, you know, sort of green, leafy plants in. If you're in an area you grow bananas like Florida, plant lots of bananas. You can plant your bananas, there's a good place for bananas there, and between your trees there, and they do well in both those sites. You have a lot of fun doing this. If you make your swale and wait a year or two before you do anything about planting, then your swale, it will certainly be invaded by weeds and by grasses. And then you've got a toilsome job of mulching your way along your swale, as much as you do anywhere else in grasslands. So don't let it get away. Put it in what you want to start with. Honey plants ought to be along the swale. Ground covers, root crops are good along the swale, of course. All root crops love loose, unconsolidated banks. Potatoes on the inside do quite well, so on and so forth. Okay?
Bill, what's your distance between swales along the contour? Are you doing it
Going up contour,
along the contour?
along the contours. The swale goes completely on contour as long as the contour stays on your property. How big is your property? Yeah. So, what? No, he means between contours, not along contours. That's what I asked him. He said no, along the contours. You heard him. I thought he might have meant between contours. He didn't mean between contours.
I meant on the contour.
Yeah.
How far apart should you put the swale?
You put it continuously, breaking only where you want to leave place to drive through for a road. Every time you come to a place where you've decided to come uphill with a road, you stop your swale and start the other side of the road.
We're going to mark out a contour so everybody get a chance to do that. Most people, what you can do on
Obviously, you have to cross up and down hill with a tractor occasionally, and that should be a ridge road going up, and that'll break your swales. It stops at the road and starts the other side. Any pipelines you want to bring down, you should stop and start on the other side. Any big trees in the way of a swale you want to leave there, like a big oak, you run up to about the door away from the oak and then go that far and start your swale again. Or you dig very deeply behind your oak and run your swale much deeper uphill and then on. Or if you've got good clays to play with, you can clay out on the low side of the oak, pack that, roll that down as though it were an earth bank, and go and bring the water out round below your oak. But don't risk losing a big tree because your swale will survey it through it. And it's safer to actually stop your swale and go the other side of the tree and start again.
I was getting confused.
Swale has no particular shape. If we are running it on a bank, we run it on contour. If we're putting it out here, we can simply make it a big dish and run little bits of downpipe into it. Right? Looking down on a swale, it has no shape. You can make it wide, small, deep, shallow.
Is silting ever a problem with swale?
No, because you're not running water at any speed anyway. What you do get, as you'll notice out here, is if you've got unstable country here, like where we're driving round, we'll get silts, and they come across the base, and they add greatly to your growing capacity. There's silt plus the leaf. Yes, it is. But we should be trying to stabilise that at the same time. Well, in pockets in the rocks, it's good to plant trees. Every rock that's emergent in our granitic country is a runoff area. And therefore, it's always wetter around a rock than it is on non-rocky ground. Trees like pocketing through rocks. Or you can, build little rock walls. If you've got lots of rocks, you can make a little hole for a tree, whatever sort, build a little rock wall, throw half a bale of hay behind that and put your tree in. Lots of things like that we've done. Rocks are good, and you don't need really much to cultivate anything where the rocks. Perfect place for figs. Figs just love rocks. If you've got figs out in the open and you put a little can of rocks up around your fig, it does much better because you get that slow air movement, condensation on the rocks at night, and it's always moist under rocks. And you get lots of scorpions coming in and crapping in there, and then you get lizards eating the scorpions and crapping in the rocks. And you have a constant fertiliser. Then you get little wood lice casting their skins. So rocks, if you can rock mulch around a tree, you've done it a great service, really.
Does that same thing hold for gravel?
Well, I'll move to gravel. We've been asked about gravel. If you have a large source of gravel and near a cinder cone or something that belongs to you and you don't think you're destroying a national monument or anything, or if your daddy's got a gravel crusher, you can go, and only in that case where you have an awful lot of gravel, you can grow in deserts without water and without rainfall using a system called an arenado. You recognise that word, don't you? Arena. What does it mean? Sand. A sanded area. So you ensand your plantations. There's your desert, and here's your daddy's rocks, about 9 inches deep. You cover it with gravel or cinder. In the Canary Islands, the name of that is picon, or cinder. Then you're pulling the cinder back in places you put your trees in, and then push it back again around the stems loosely, or you pull the cinder out of a row and put a potato at the base and then put the cinder back. And that cinder continually condenses night air, transfers moisture from the night air to the base, and is a habitat for little animals. So you get quite a rich base, quite moist. And if again you go to the Canary Islands, you'll see trees which have never had rain on their leaves ever. It just doesn't rain on a lot of Canaries. Growing quite strongly out of a good thick cinder mulch. 11.2 inches.
Where do they get the cinder?
Where do they get the cinders? From cinder cones. Canaries are partly volcanic. The same stuff as you got all the way between Santa Fe and Albuquerque. Huge cinder mounds.
Is it a basalt?
No, they're cinder from volcanic eruptions. And arenado, that's another technique. You can use anything you've got a mass of, you know, bottle tops, cork particles, whatever you've got, and put it very deep. And as long as it's nice and perennial. Some of those arenado fields have been down for, you know, probably 4 centuries. And they grow potatoes in them most years. Yeah. Just a loose cover over the soil. It traps air and traps moisture. It's inhabited by a whole range of sort of little megafauna. I mean, not macrofauna. We're not talking about elephants here. Well, you've got a lot of money for your gravel question there. And it can be, you know, 3/4 inch gravel or washed pebble from rivers. Can be silica, can be basalt, can be cinder. Don't know what else it can be. Can be bottle tops. Whatever. What you got, you use, right? It's on the tip of my tongue, the name of this island. It hasn't rained there in history from 1450. It's, but what they do there, here's the island, you know. They dig by hand, I have to say, deep pits like this, about 9 feet deep. And any rocks they strike, they put on the uphill side like this. And they go on digging these pits. They've pitted the whole island. Why can't I think of the name of that island? And then they, when they dug the pits, they take the cinder off the top and put that aside somewhere, dig the pits down to soil, and then they return the cinder over the pits like that. So they dig pits, place the arenado, and in the base of each pit, they put a valuable tree, a fig, a grape, something like that. And the whole island has trees all over it, 1 tree per pit. And as I say, there's no records of rain on that island. Lanzarote. Why didn't you know that? Why didn't you suggest that? Lanzarote. Everybody knows Lanzarote. On that island, the entire agriculture is based on an arenado of condensation pits, because at night any air that's cooler drains into the pits. Therefore it's already at dew point when it gets into the bottom of the pits, and it condenses in the bottom of the pits and runs through the arenado into the base of the trees. So you've got, every night you've got a certain contribution of moisture to the base of the pit. And there's the roots of the tree. And out comes your fig tree. And then what happens? You get a very good condensation drip from the leaves. Okay? So Lanzarote really lives on condensation, as it has no rainfall. It has no record of rainfall, and probably has no future of rainfall. It lies right off the Sahara Desert on African coast.
Is there a lot of nutrients in that cinder ash?
Well, all this stuff breaks down. So it adds very finely divided dusts, mineral dusts, yeah, does do. So if you're using granitic dust, you get high potassium. So that's good for things that you're cropping a lot, like potatoes. And if you're using basalt dust, you better get an analysis, but you're getting, complex minerals, bases too, so you're not going to get acidity. There's very few acid lavas. The reason why Java and Sumatra, which are where?
Indonesia.
Only because you've been there. Didn't learn that at school. Are so productive is that all the volcanoes there produce very alkaline lava. And if they hadn't, there would be no Indonesia, because it's heavily cropped and continuously cropped. Lanzarote, rainfall, 0 inches.
How do they get drinking water there?
Yes, from the crowns of the trees. The rain tree used, as I already told you, but your memories are shockingly short, I find. The drinking tree on the Canary Islands is a tree called Till, Acacia fetens. And they make their cisterns in a circle around the drip line. And the cisterns feed a large tank, and each village has a rain tree. Rain tree is Acacia fetens. And who cut down the acacias? Spaniards, you're right. And that's why when you go to Lanzarote or La Palma, look at the brick walls, you'll see it faded paint after 400, 500 years. See, Spaniard, go home. Yeah, they're not welcome. Much the same as you see American, go home in Hawaii or in many Indian lands. And never give up,
Aren't the Canaries part of Spain at this time? Or?
You never conquer anybody, You've got to come to a deal, Sooner or later you've got to come to a deal. It's got to be a fair deal. You can't keep people oppressed forever, They're going to break out sooner or later, And if you didn't treat them well, they're going to be nasty about it. Time to get kind to Indians, wetbacks, Negroes, Spaniards. Time to get fair. Yeah, you've got to have everybody with equal rights and at least, if not equal, fair access to all resources. Otherwise, you're living in a very dangerously poised situation forever. Lanzarote, conquered by the Spaniards in 1450 AD and used as a launching pad for their invasion of the Americas. It's on the Canary Islands that you can find plants which were travelling both ways, plants that the Spaniards were taking to the Americas, and the first plants that they brought back from the Americas were established on the Canaries and then taken on to Europe. So your earliest corn varieties are there. A lot of your very early cultivars, your earliest potatoes are there. First potatoes brought out of America are on the Canaries. Sunflowers, they're an American developed crop. Some of your early beans are there. Some beans from extinct groups are there. And then the Spanish staged the plants to there and then went on to Europe with them. The natives of the Canary Islands are called the Guanche, and they lived in very large caves, higher than this. They dug them, about half as wide, running in 300 or 400 feet. So they were cave-dwelling people in the soft ash sediments of the islands. And they had a goat, which was an ancient form of goat, still there. And as the first Guanche had been Moorish slaves or captives and had all their tongues taken out, they couldn't speak. So they were a result of a shipwreck or something. They were European, and they arrived without their tongues, right? So we presume that some caliph or somebody had their tongues removed to stop them babbling. And as you can't speak, you have to devise a language. So the language devised in the Canary Islands by Guanche is a whistle language, and they can still use it, or parts of it, from island to island even. Yeah. So if you want to listen to people who can only whistle to each other, you go to the Canaries. But the Guanche, of course, can now speak because their children had tongues, which contradicts Lysenko. Lysenko said, if you pull everybody's tongue out, their children will eventually be born without tongues. Stalin believed him. Luckily, it wasn't correct. Also, the use of condensation on the Canaries is, I mean, you can go on for hours. Studying the water systems on the Canaries take you weeks and weeks. For instance, Canary Island pines, which have down, if you climb one, you'll find at the base of every limb there's a little wooden cup chiseled out, and these are all little drinking holes. So for the shepherds, there's no water, no rain, so every limb that will run water down has a cup chiseled in the base, and the shepherds just carry drinking straw and climb the trees and drink. And then the villagers live on the ocotillas.
So the goat gets moisture from what it eats.
Goat gets moisture from what he always does. Never have to give a goat a drink. Right. And the guanches get moisture from the trees.
So it's any goat, not just this breed.
No, all goats. Yeah. Okay. But the Guanche goats don't, they're disease immune to some modern goat diseases, so they're being used widely now to strengthen the effete herds of the Swiss and people like that. We've talked about pits, and we've talked about swales, and we've talked about little runoff pans around trees, and we've talked about cutting bits of discs and putting gashes across the landscape. And you can also, by hand, build little things that are higher here at the wall here, and you can put a tree there, a boomerang, so-called. And put one of these wings lower than another on the slope so the water runs out, and then do another boomerang, like that. Okay. So those boomerangs will hold trees too. And then we did do this thing before for flatlands. Made a little depression there and put a tree in here on flatlands. But on slopes also you can do that. You just have a very gentle cross section like that, and dig a tire in there and put a tree in it. So these run water down slopes into these little pans, nets. And they're done by hand on steep slopes. Work quite well too. Like a lot of small systems where you don't raise much earth up and where you don't dig far down, they're intended only to establish the trees. And after that you can forget them. You don't maintain them. Once the trees are up, you've got your condensation, you've got your infiltration, just let your system decay. Same with these, really.
Both of those, net and boomerang, you just let it go and actually build it up.
Yeah, boomerangs tend to stay. They're about this high at the depth. They may be largish. They tend to be there for many years. And net and pans tend to go. The other thing is there's a particular desert pavements we'll discuss. They're basically two or three types. They're called erg, or sand pavements, sandy deserts, reg, or hard deserts, and gibber. You can use whatever word you like there. I've used the Australian one. Stony deserts. These are pavements. Stony or gibber deserts are quite good. Probably in America, certainly in Australia. they have a windrowing rake, you know, the same as you'd use for hay, but much thicker steel, which actually windrows stones into heaps. So your desert has a very slight slope, and you windrow along contour, and you end up with heaps of stone, again on contour. And these are as good as excavating swales. Water comes down, runoff, it's impeded greatly by the stones at the base. By the time it gets through, it's often infiltrated. Insects use it, and if these are about 1/2 to 1 metre high, they're significant condensation units, and they're always condensing into the soil below. So on this type of desert, on the stony deserts, gibber deserts, you use stone piles for miles. And you'll see quite a lot of work being done now in Ethiopia and places like that, where they're gathering up the stones on the gibber, making walls, and getting very good, you know, results from cropping and trees from it. Okay?
But they can be stones, or what else would you suggest?
Gibber's always the same. The desert is good soil covered by thousands of stones.
But if it's not stone, if there's not a stony desert, it's just...
We've dealt with erg and reg in the sense of these constructs and net and pans and swales.
The sands will hold the water through.
Yes. I was about to say, you know, obviously you don't try and run swales through granitic boulders. If you strike a boulder in the middle of a swale, you've got a swale surveyed to there, just drop and go on there. You know, don't try to go through the boulder. Or go the other side and go on. But if you want to also run a bit of water along the swale, drop and pick it up here and go on. Yeah, I ran hundreds of miles of swales in granitic country and struck one boulder, and then we just dropped and went on. 156 miles we ran of swales. Ended up with 9 million gallons of water stored, I think. Yeah. You can run lots of miles of swales in very few weeks. Okay, if you've got it all surveyed, the survey method here, when we did that long swale, was we captured 2 hippie ladies walking along the road, gave them 10 minutes training on a water-filled pipe, and set them off with their backpacks, tents, and we just followed them with the machines, and they were a day or so ahead of us. And they'd camp and eat their fried beans or whatever they had, and then they'd adjust their bangles, hang their crystals around their neck, pick up the hose and go on ahead of us. And the levels were perfect.